Hi, today I want to talk to you about Microsoft Access, the database portion of Microsoft Office. If you're watching this video, you're probably in the position where you need to use it and you need to learn about it real fast. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the software in this and part two of the next video. So hopefully you'll be able to get productive with it relatively quickly, which you should be able to. It's not a hard software once you get into it. Just to let you know a little bit about myself to begin with, my name is Andrew Camo. I'm a software consultant and technology author. I have over 20 years of experience with Microsoft Access. I've been using it since 1997 when I found it and decided to use it to automate some of my own work. I've also used other database technologies such as SQL Server and MySQL. I'm the author of a couple of books, MySQL Explained and Microsoft Access for Beginners. And if you'd like to see more of my work, both with Microsoft Access and other technologies, you can check out my website at camosoftware.com, where you'll see some more of my articles and materials that I've written for your benefit. So what is Microsoft Access? Access is what's called a relational database management system. That big technical term that you might see if you do a lot of work with databases simply means that it's a software that enables you to create databases and manage them as you need to. And it's called relational because the data is maintained within tables that are designed around the subjects within your data. So if you're working in a library database, you'll probably have a table called books and patrons and checkouts and so on. And if you're working in a production database, you might have a table called products and a table called customers. Those are all centered around different subjects within your data. These tables are linked together and you're able to query them to get the information as you need it and to report on it as needed. So that's essentially what a relational database management system is. So it's, even though it sounds a little bit complicated, it's really not once you get to understand it. Microsoft Access was introduced in 1992 along with Microsoft Office, and it's been steadily improving ever since then. It's currently available as part of Office 2016 and as part of Office 365. Microsoft Access remains the leading desktop database software out there. You'll see some others in Office suites like OpenOffice, but Access is one that you'll hear about a lot. It's a desktop database software because it's designed specifically to work on your PC, as opposed to other software that's designed to work on a computer server or over the internet or so on. This is a desktop database software that is intended for Office users. Now, one of the great features about Access is that it allows for rapid development of applications or rapid application development. And it's generally intended for databases that are going to serve a small number of users or concurrent users, say 10 to 15. We're not talking about databases that are going to cover an entire enterprise or an entire company. This is for department level databases, small solutions that fill in the gaps where other software doesn't cover it. Now, if you've used Microsoft Office for any length of time, chances are good that you've worked with Excel. And you may be tempted to think of Access in terms of Excel. Access has tables, where Excel has spreadsheets with rows and columns. The two are quite a bit different. For now, let's take a real quick look at Access versus Excel and see how the two compare. Excel, as you can see in this example here of the loan amortization schedule, is really good for summarizing and analyzing data that can be expressed in a set of rows and columns, usually on one or two worksheets within a workbook. And it's really good for that purpose because you can input all your data, whether it's a balance sheet, whether it's a ledger, and you can make calculations, you can summarize it as you need to. Access is more appropriate for complex record-based data. This is data that you're gathering over time and need to continuously enter, like orders, customer orders, uh, vehicle repair records, library checkouts, as I mentioned earlier. You can enter data as you go, and this is data that might require more sophisticated data entry features like the forms that you see here, and you might want to create custom reports. Access can do a lot of this, and you also might want to develop something that can be used by multiple users at the same time, so that one user can be entering one type of data, another user can be querying it as it's being put in, or entering a completely different type of data. Access is really good for designing those sophisticated applications that accommodates that complex data. And as you can see on the right here, I actually have a couple of examples. The figure in the background is the diagram of the tables within a Microsoft Access database that I use for time and billing. And in the foreground, you have Access itself, its interface with an application that I designed for job search activities. And it has a couple of objects open, like the data entry form, a table, and a report. Access really excels at reporting capabilities, so you can design some really comprehensive reports for your data. Now, one thing that I see often is that people will use Excel for a certain amount of time, and when their data outgrows Excel, then they'll start looking at Access. So it's common to start an application in Excel, take it as far as it'll go, and then move it over to Access when you need to. So when should you use Microsoft Access? What's it good for? Let's take a look at a few of the things it's capable of and some stuff that you shouldn't use it for. Data that needs to be collected and reported on over time. So again, as I said before, if you're collecting order data, if you're collecting continuous record data, whether it's your own data or something within your company, then Access is really good for that, as opposed to Excel, which is usually used for a finite set of data on a worksheet. Access is good for developing multi-user applications. Now again, the ideal scenario is you have an office where you have 10 to 15 users that might be accessing the database at the same time. You have, or an order entry team, you have people running sales reports, etc. So Access would be really good for developing multi-user applications in that way. Another thing Access is really good for is assembling data from various sources. Access can work with Excel data, it can work with text files, it can even work with HTML web pages, and it can work with other Access databases. You can string multiple Access databases together. So if you have data that's in a variety of formats, sometimes Access is really good for pulling all that data together into one application that you can design reports off of. Access should not be used for sensitive or confidential data, especially personal data that might be targeted for identity theft. Access does have some encryption. It has a database password, but again, remember that all your data is in one file, and that's easy to carry away. And no matter how good the password, well, eventually you have to anticipate that somebody's going to crack it. So it's best not to keep any really confidential databases in Access. You wouldn't want to create a human resources database with employee social security numbers, for example. Big data. Data that's going to exceed a couple of gigabytes in size. Now you can put a lot of data in Access if you design your tables appropriately. But if you're dealing with a huge amount of data, we're talking about 10, 15 gigabytes or even more of data, the Access file format is limited to 2 gigabytes per file. Now again, you can string multiple files together and store more data in different files, But Access is really not designed to handle big data. So you have to take into account how much data you're ultimately going to generate. And finally, Access is not really designed to handle large numbers of concurrent users. In other words, you don't want a lot of people in the database at the same time. Now, if you are anticipating that you're going to have a lot of people around the company using the database, but probably only have like 3 or 4 or 5 in the database at any given time, that's fine. But if you have a huge, say again, order entry team, if you have 20, 30 order entry people taking orders over the phone, you would not want to use Access for something like that, because Access, after say 20 or more users, it would start to slow down. The official limit, I believe, is 255, but it's going to start to slow down long before that. And you also would not use Access for data that's being accessed over the web. It's not really designed to interface with the web. For something like that, you would want something like SQL Server or MySQL, not only for the interface, but also in terms of security. You would want something that could be locked down and maybe granted user names and passwords. And the next question is, do you need a programming degree? Do you actually need to be a programmer to use Access? Most emphatically, no. You do not need to be a programmer. You don't need to be a genius to work with Access. You can actually become very productive with Access in a very short time, even though there's a lot to learn about it. There's a lot that goes into Access between the table design and the queries and forms and reports. There's a lot that you can do with it, but you can learn the basics in a very short time, be productive with it, and then learn as you go. I also think that Microsoft Access is a great way to start learning about databases and programming concepts if you want to take it further. If you actually want to work with databases full-time and learn how to program and learn how to design applications, Access is a great place to start because it makes it relatively easy and it's a friendly user interface where, as I said, you can learn just a little bit at a time and really feel like that you've accomplished something. So in part 2, we're actually going to get started with Microsoft Access. I'm going to design a very small application and you'll see how some of the things come together. And in part 2 and in the next series that I do, you're going to see the real thought process that goes into it. This is not going to be an incredibly polished video where everything works right first time and I have all the answers right there. No, you're going to see the thought process. You're going to see the oops and the times when I'm not sure why something is working the way it is, and then I find out. So I really want you to see what it's like to work with Access and get a real feeling for it. So please tune in for part 2. Thanks for watching, and again, if you want to see more of the stuff that I've done with Microsoft Access and other stuff, you can check out my website at comosoftware.com.